Just right up front, I just want to go ahead and get this out of the way. My name is Crimson Fist. I dress up like a superhero and I fight crime. Now, I understand that that's weird as shit. So if you guys have questions about any of that, we can talk about it at the end. But for the next 20 minutes, let's pretend that superhero is like a normal career path for someone to choose. Is that cool with everybody? Cool. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is the use of technology and data analysis to try and predict crimes and stop them before they happen. How I got interested in this subject was I started doing this about 9 years ago. And I had little more than just a costume and a pocket full of good intentions. I didn't have a plan. I didn't really know what I was doing at all. I picked a big part of Atlanta, which you can see here. This is pretty much in the red square is all of downtown Atlanta for the most part. Right down underneath the square there is our local hackerspace. If anybody's familiar with Atlanta, this will kind of give you a good gauge for it. So everything between Freeside Atlanta all the way up to Piedmont Park, basically. It's about 3 or 4 square miles. And so what I would do on any given patrol is I would just pick an area inside that square, patrol there for 6 or 7 hours over the course of the night, and just kind of hope for the best, hope that something happened and I was able to help people. And that worked sort of well, but not really well at all. I patrolled 3 nights a week, 52 weeks a year, and I'd say I probably ran into about like 3 crimes in progress on average every year. So I didn't like the way the system worked. And I decided that, I have been a hacker for most of my life, so I was like, okay, I've got to figure out what the problem is and how I can actually make this thing work for me. So the first step that I had was I decided that instead of patrolling this gigantic area, depending on where I was, I didn't really know anything about the area. I could tell you, what street led to where, but I couldn't tell you anything about the people that lived there or what was normal behavior for folks there and what was abnormal behavior for people. So I decided instead that I was going to pick just one small area at a time and patrol there every night until it got to the point where I knew everything there was to know about that area. So the past 2 years I've patrolled this little section downtown. It's called Castleberry Hill. It's about 4 or 5 square blocks. And in the 2 years that I've been there, I now know 95% of the people that live and work in the neighborhood. I know every little secret shortcut, everything about it. And so I use that to be able to spot suspicious behavior kind of right off the bat. I know what the neighborhood is usually like, so if anything sticks out, I know to kind of keep an eye on that. And it works better than my original plan, but it's still not perfect. Oh, this thing's coming up again. Just a second, guys. Sorry, I'm at a hacker con. I don't have my Wi-Fi on. So the system works okay as it is, as you see it here, but it was still not great. But I did start to notice a trend as I was patrolling in this smaller area, is that getting seen a lot in one place, I kind of developed a reputation in the neighborhood. Word got around that, like, yeah, there's this guy dressing like a superhero walking around, and he's actually freaking serious about it. So it got to the point where, if I was on patrol and you'd see 2 guys walking down the street, they'd be, looking through the windows of cars, every car, they'd check the windows and see if there's anything good inside. And then they'd see me, and they'd turn around and they'd leave. And so I said, well, that's exactly what I want to do. Like, I don't want to have to actually fight people if I can help it. So if I could just make that happen every time, it'd be awesome. But in order to do that, I have to know where the crime's going to happen. I've got a pretty good intuition just knowing the neighborhood, but I have to have better data to really know where things are going to happen and when they're going to happen. But I kind of thought that, that's science fiction stuff. There's no way that I can really have an idea of officially where things are going to happen. But it turns out I was wrong, and that was when I came across this, which is called PredPol. PredPol stands for Predictive Policing, and it's an actual service that's offered to police forces. We use it in Atlanta. That does exactly what I said. It takes all their data from all their police reports and puts a display up in the officer's car that says, hey, if you're not doing anything, go to one of these little red squares, because this is where a crime is most likely to occur at this exact moment right now. So between calls, the cops in Atlanta or any of the other cities that use it, they'll just drive, they'll park there. Each of these squares is about 500 feet by 500 feet. And they'll park there, and in Atlanta, they report a success rate of about 18% increase in crimes that are just prevented before they start. So that's really cool, and I really wanted to get access to it. Of course, it's made for the police force, so you kind of have to be in the police force to get access to it. And even if I could get access to it, it costs like 3 of my house to just have it for a year. So I said, okay, well, I can't have Predpol, but I bet I could probably make something that's pretty darn close. So I decided what I was going to do. I'm not a very technical guy, so I decided what I was going to do is I was going to try and make this using nothing but freely available public websites, software, things like that. And so I had to figure out, first of all, what were the steps that it was going to take to make something like this. And so I figured what I need to do first and foremost is I need to have the actual raw data. I need the crime statistics that I can look at from different variables, and I need a way of basically making the map. I need a way to take the data and have it tell me where I need to be going. So what I started with, I went right to the source for as far as my crime data, and I went to the Atlanta police website. I lucked out in Atlanta that they have this nice mapping system where they put all the reports online so you can access it however you want. And I said, okay, well, that's cool, but the more I looked at it, the map kind of sucks. You can really only look at things from one variable. Let me go back. There we go. Sorry. So what you can see on the map here, over on the right-hand side, you've got little check boxes. You can check off whatever kind of crime you want to search for, and then underneath it you can set a date range. So I think they give you can look up to a range of up to 60 days and just see all the crime that happened in that particular area. And when you go in to each of the little dots you click, it gives you some further details about the crime, which is cool if you're just the average person who's maybe looking to buy a house and you want to see how it is. But for me, I needed to be able to look at that data from 4 or 5 different angles in order to really figure out what the trends are. So this is where the process gets really, really crappy. And I basically had to go through and click all those dots and hand copy and paste all the information into a spreadsheet. As of right now, I've got about 4.5 years worth of crime data from APD that I use in my maps. But I copy them into a spreadsheet that looks something like this. So you can see I've got the date, the day of the week, the type of crime, the address, and then some extra data that I just need in order to be able to map it. The downside being that the Atlanta police don't list the day of the week that the crime occurred. So after I compile all the data from their website, I then have to go through and look up what the actual day of the week that particular date correlates to. So all in all, when I sit down and update my maps, it takes me probably a good 3 hours to get all the data, the new data that's on their website, and then go through and add everything to it. But once I have it, then the process is pretty painless after that point. Now I use a website called BatchGeo, which is it's a free service. I think they do have a paid service you can get to save your maps and things like that. But basically, with BatchGeo, you take a spreadsheet that has the information, like I said, you upload it, and it maps out all the points of data for you. So what we're looking at here, I decided when I was putting the slides together that since I'm talking on a Friday, I basically just pretend like I was getting ready for a Friday night patrol. So what we're looking at here, this is looking at things through a time variable. I should probably explain one thing, going back here real quick. If you see over in column F there, it says watch. The watch is basically the closest I can get to the accurate time of the crime. And it basically is just the shift that the officer was on when he wrote the report for the crime. So in Atlanta, we have 3 different watches. You have day watch, morning watch, and evening watch. And I generally patrol during the morning watch, which runs from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I'm usually done by about 3 or 4 in the morning, but that's the time frame I fall under. So what we're looking at on the map here, this is every crime that happened during the morning watch in, this is 2013. So I get all of the points here on this map. I make another map looking at things from another variable. In this case, I look at the day of the week. So I've got my time variable, then I look for every crime that happened on a Friday through the whole year, make a map of that, and then I go through and basically make Predpol. I use Google Map Engine, and I go through the maps like we saw before and find anything where there's a cluster of crimes within about 50 meters of one another. And then I go through and just add a little block to the map here. And there's different layers that I do. So I have the layer you're looking at here is specifically crimes that happen during morning watch. I create a new layer that's specifically crimes that happen during Friday night. And then I can make layer upon layer for whatever variables I want to look at. For this example, we're just going to use those 2 because that's actually the parameters that Predpol uses. But I could look at any of the stuff you saw in the spreadsheet. I can make this for that and compile them together. So once I have all my layers put together, it's pretty much as simple as just tossing them on top of one another. So you can see, I'm going to see if I can get this to pick up my voice over here. Probably not. But you can see, like here, we have spots that overlap. Now up here, we have spots that overlap. Down here, we have a spot that overlaps. So looking at that, I know that when I'm planning my patrols at the beginning of the night, that those are the places that I need to make sure I'm in more often. And usually what I'll do is very similar to the police. I'll have my route go around, and when I hit one of the spots, I'll stay there for about 15, maybe 20 minutes, just step out to the street light, make myself very visible so that anybody who wants to come through will, it's not easy to miss me if I'm standing out there. And then, of course, after 20 minutes, move on, stop at the next place a little while later, things like that. And the weird thing about it is that it actually works really well. A lot better than I thought it was. I started doing this just kind of on a fluke. I used to do the previous maps, and then I just came up with this idea, and I was like, okay, I'll give it a try and see if it works. And I'd say that in the 6 months that I've been doing this, I went from running into a crime maybe every 5 or 6 patrols to now I run into something happening every other night. I've kind of become obsessed with it since that point. So I've just been developing maps for everything. So, for example, like this here, this is a map of every shortcut in the neighborhood. So every little place that I could sneak through to get to somewhere quicker, or every place that a criminal's going to try and get through to get to one of those spots. So, if I see something that correlates with one of the shortcuts on my prediction map, I know that if I hang out right there where that shortcut enters the square, that's where I'm most likely to see somebody coming through to try and do something. Some other stuff I'm working on that I don't have a slide for it, is I'm working on a system where I'm going around the neighborhood, I'm mapping out every security camera we have in the neighborhood, which direction they're facing, and then I'm working on talking to the people who own the cameras and finding out exactly what range those cameras cover. So effectively, we'll have a community-provided closed-circuit neighborhood watch. So anything that happens in the neighborhood, if we know the time, we can go back and I can say, okay, well, if it happened there, this person's camera probably has something, this person's camera probably has something, and we can get whatever data we can get from there and hopefully, catch the people that did it, even if we can stop them before it happened. And I think that's my last slide. But the one problem I run into is, like I said before, I'm not a technical person. Like I said, I do all this by copying and pasting everything. And that's why I wanted to present this to a crowd like you guys, because you seem to know a thing or two about computers. And I feel like a system like this, that if it were automated and easier for people to use, could be used by anyone, anywhere. Right now, I mean, like I said, credit pull costs an arm and a leg for people to use, and there's a lot of police departments that could benefit from it, but that don't have nearly enough resources to actually purchase the software. And so, I'm here asking you guys if anybody has any ideas that could help make the process more efficient, speed things up to where it's not a 3-hour process to do, 9 or 10 different crimes every night. If anybody has any ideas, I'd love to talk to you after the talk. Thank you guys for coming. So this was a pretty short talk, I take it. But if anybody has any questions about this or about crime or about spandex or whatever, I'm right here.
Have you tried talking to the police? Are they willing to share any of that data with you directly?
Yes and no. The beat officers, the actual patrolmen on the streets, are very open. I do a lot of work with them when I'm on patrol, just in regards of, like, if they're searching for somebody and they see me, they'll pass on information to me so I can keep an eye out for it, and vice versa. When you get higher up in the chain of command, the people that would actually be able to approve, giving out that information, they're a lot less nice about it. Just simply because there's a lot of, especially giving it to a person who does what I do, there's a lot of liability in that regard. But I think that maybe approaching it without this and going and talking to someone, I might be able to have some success with it. So.
My thought was just that from a standpoint of automating that data, that if you could convince them to put more detail on the website or something, so that you could pick it up in an automated fashion, that would be easier for everybody.
Yeah.
Share it with the general public.
Yeah. I know a few of the IT guys at the police department, so I might have to see if I can pull some strings with them. But
criminals have Facebook too.
Yeah. My suggestion: call bullshit on the liability issue. Seattle publishes exactly what you're after. Use them as an example. Get what you know.
I believe that Atlanta also has an open data initiative with, civic hackers and things like that, and so they would be another excellent resource to both get the data you need out of the city and get some help in building out your application and open sourcing it and getting more feedback. So I'll connect you.
Okay, thank you. You got a question back there, man?
For those areas that overlap, because I'm from Atlanta, I know kind of where Hill. What would you say sticks out in that area? Is it bad lighting? Is it the architecture?
Mostly lighting. Our two worst areas in Castleberry, there's an intersection at Fair Street and Walker Street. I don't know if you know, but that's where we get most of our violent crime occurs at that intersection. And one of the things that I've noticed through my patrols, and I'm working with the neighborhood association there to try and get the problem resolved, is that there's a lot of street light, but there's trees right underneath it all down the street. And so when you're, where you park your car, where you walk on the sidewalk is almost pitch black at night. So anybody can go in, do whatever they want, and leave. And actually at that intersection there, we have, APD has a closed circuit camera system in place, and yet we still get people shot at that intersection right underneath the camera because the camera can't see what's happening there at all. Lighting is in general, in most places, one of the biggest contributors to crime rates in the area.
Hi. You've been using the state of group set for 6 months now?
The last stuff,
right.
Yeah, for about 6 months.
Have you been able to notice any change in the right?
In the actual trends themselves?
So has it shifted any since your presence? Have you been I really like that you're using a lot of data because you can actually tell if you're achieving results. Have you noticed any trends or differences?
Since I've started using the predictive aspect of it, I still think it's a little too early to notice For sure. I mean, I definitely see some things that I think are a change, but I still need more data in order to really be able to tell an actual trend. But in general, yes, just simply because you can see on the maps areas that used to have a lot of crime are now starting to have less crime, and the crime is unfortunately moving to other areas, which I think will always be a problem, but it's moving to areas where there's a much higher police presence. So they're actually getting a lot more arrests in those areas because the criminals aren't able to go to where they want to be, so they have to go to where they're going to get caught. You get the right.
Yes, sir. Next question is, do you have any ideas? You've been in there in that specific area, and you've been focused on that specific area. What could be done so that, to be honest, you're not needed? You do what you do because you feel it's needed.
Yeah.
What could be done so that you're not necessary?
Well, that's actually kind of been a goal of mine from the start. You know, I started doing the superhero thing because I believe that it's everyone's responsibility as a member of a community to police themselves. You know, the police have a job and it's important, but actually protecting your community is up to you and the people who live there to make an environment that's not conducive to crime. And that's actually starting to happen in Castleberry Hill in a big way. You know, there's a lot more people that are proactive in changing the way that things work in the community so that criminals don't want to come there. You know, there's a lot of little things. You know, the lighting thing is working on getting fixed. Just in general, cleaning up the neighborhood, removing graffiti, things like that. Things that make it not look like an area that crime should be committed in, because that's a big part of it. Is the environment.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, to more clearly answer your question, what it would take for something like this to not be necessary is for people to just start doing stuff.
Somebody else.
You know? Well, not somebody else, everybody else.
Everybody.
You know, and it's not that they have to go out and do what I do, but it's that if everybody does something to help make the community safer, then the community will become safer.
Kitty Genovese.
What is your relationship with the police in that area?
You've got a microphone, but I can't hear you.
What is your relationship with the police in that area? I assume that they see you and know you.
Yeah. In Castleberry, the cops are surprisingly receptive to it. You know, I've been there for about 2 years, and out of the 9 that I've done it, and it's the only time that I've ever had a cop stop me and be like, "What are you doing?" and tell them, and they go, "Oh, okay," and then they drive away. But yeah, you know, and I think it's just it speaks to the nature of that particular neighborhood, because it's kind of a laid back, artsy neighborhood, and so you know the cops are just like, "It's Castleberry Hill, why the hell not?"
You've probably seen the phone apps where people join and participate, where they see speed traps and things like that, and they can input the location of a speed trap, and everybody else that subscribes to it can look on that app and say, "Oh, you know, 10 minutes ago this guy reported there was a speed trap right there." That kind of a thing might help you if you were to start a site that collected that kind of data and got people in the community interested in logging on and posting that data. You know, Google Maps uses a markup language called KML, and I've used it to create a lot of maps in my business for putting pins on the maps and drawing lines and that kind of thing. It's a fairly simple markup language. It seems like that kind of thing would be probably pretty easy to script so that you could automate that from a database that you had people voluntarily contributing to.
I definitely agree. We have, in Castleberry, we use a service called Nextdoor. Nextdoor is basically a private social network that just is specifically for like one neighborhood. And so we use that. That's kind of, while we don't have an actual like neighborhood watch, that becomes kind of the neighborhood watch phone tree sort of thing. So it helps to a degree. I definitely think your idea is better, just simply because it gives a more visual way of looking at things. But Nextdoor helps a lot. In fact, I just last night I got an alert on my phone while I was getting ready for bed that somebody got shot, and it was, the good thing is it, as soon as somebody posts an alert like that, it immediately goes out to everybody who's connected to the network, sends it to their phone, so everybody knows, like, right here we had gunshots, don't go there, or just anything, over here there's a roadblock, don't go there, sort of thing. So, okay.
Yeah, I have a rental property here in the Nashville area that I have a remotely operated camera on. It covers all the features that I need.
Sure.
And I've made that available to Homeland Security because there's a target within viewing distance that they would otherwise have to have a warrant for. If that's a good way in the neighborhood for the neighbors to share their camera IP addresses among themselves.
Yeah, that's one of the big problems I'm running into with that particular part of the project is that we have a lot of security camera systems in the neighborhood, but probably about 90% of them are not connected to the outside world.
Okay.
The few that we do have that anyone can access, they have been really great about just kind of letting anybody, log in to see what's happening around that particular area. But we're in a work in progress about trying to get things a little more tethered together. So.
Lighting in public areas was mentioned. What is your opinion of the effectiveness of the lighting in public areas at deterring crime or removing crime?
Well, let me correct this. This is strictly speculative because I don't have any real, information to go on. But I do notice that areas that are well lit have less crime. I can see that just from looking at the maps and comparing it to what I actually see on the street. The areas where there's a lot of light, people don't want to break into a car there because everybody can see it happen. So I think that there definitely would be a big correlation to, when you improve lighting in an area, then it may not stop crime 100%, but it's definitely going to make it less appealing for a criminal. Anyone else? I guess not. Cool. Guys, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.